Hi, this is Ian Hui. You're listening to my dad's podcast, Who on Who.
Greetings, fellow Doctor Who fans, and welcome to a trip to the Louvre edition of Who on Who, the podcast devoted to the review of classic series Doctor Who DVDs in no particular order. I'm your host, David Huey, and thank you all for joining me on episode 15 of Who on Who. I was getting ready to record this and looking at the number, and I'm like, whoa, I've made it to 15. I didn't think I was even going to get past a dozen, but here we are, and there are plenty of more DVDs to come, so I am very excited and happy to still be here and talking to all of you. And thank you again for listening. Now, as always, before we get into today's review of the classic Tom Baker story, City of Death, I would like to take a moment to go to the email bag.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
All right. Now, I got one email from my good friend and friend of the show, Dave Keep, who writes in and says, Hi, David. I'm just listening to your latest podcast, and congratulations on another great show. I particularly enjoy your chat with Big Honkin' Steve, two Southern gentlemen having a leisurely talk, and I will be tracking down his podcasts. I wonder if you're aware that the latest issue of Doctor Who Monthly has a poll of all 200 stories, and Caves of Androzani was voted the best story of all time. I don't think that I would rate it that highly, but it does deserve a top 10 place. It was good to hear you point out that people do have a choice to watch or not watch something. While I have seen some films that have offended me and have walked out of the cinema when the line between horror and sadism was crossed, I do believe that it's important that people have the right to decide for themselves. As John Cleese said, no one has the right not to be offended. I want to thank Dave for that and for his points. He's remarking about a couple of comments that I made on the last edition of Who on Who. And funny that Dave should bring up John Cleese because he makes a surprise appearance in today's DVD review story of City of Death and is also on one of the fantastic extras, which I'll be talking about later. And before I get any further into reviewing the DVD, there's a couple of other things that I would like to address with folks. The first and the main thing is if you haven't heard it yet, please listen to Doctor Who Podshock, episode 165. I was overjoyed to be asked to be a guest host on the show. It was a lot of fun to speak again with Ken Deep and Louis Trapani, two of the hosts of Doctor Who Podshock. Unfortunately, the third host, James Naughton, was not able to make the show, but we did review the Fourth Doctor's last adventure, Logopolis, and we also got a chance to talk a little bit about the passing of classic Doctor Who producer Barry Letts. And it was a nice time to sit and talk with other Doctor Who fans and to just interact a little bit. I always enjoy that, and to that end, I enjoy having guests here on the show, to interact with as well. And today's episode, I was supposed to have on Michael from the Tin Dog Podcast. Unfortunately, Michael and I are two podcasters that crossed in the paths in the night, like ships, as they say. Our schedules just did not mesh for this particular recording, and I do have some other shows getting ready to come up and be recorded as well. So Michael graciously stepped back and said, go ahead and record this on your own, and I promise I will get back with you at a future date, and we will record another one. So I have gotten a couple of requests to review the much-loved Tom Baker story, Genesis of the Daleks. I'm putting that one in the on-deck circle, and I'm reserving that one specifically for when Michael and I can get together and record, because I would really love to talk to him about that particular story. So there is that. Also, last bit of news. You may have noticed, if you're real sharp of ear there and you're familiar with my traditional format, I started today's show with the Doctor Who theme because it has come to my, not so much my attention, but sort of just occurred to me that Who on Who is only lacking really one major ingredient to push us up there into the selective club of great Doctor Who podcasts. I mean, I've got the best listening audience already. I do a fair job as a host, and I have, of course, the amazing artistic work and website that Dave Hingley and his brother Mike have put together for me at whoonwho.com. But I don't have a theme song. And while I will admit openly to being amateur at best when it comes to music, musicality, I would love for somebody to, very similar to what Dave Hingley did for me. I just sort of made an offhanded remark at one of my early podcasts and said, I need a better logo than what I can come up with. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. Artistic vision and talent is not a strength for me. And so I just sort of threw it out there, didn't expect anything. A couple days later, I get an email from Dave Hingley saying, hey, I just doodled this on a napkin. And lo and behold, that became the new Who on Who logo, which has gotten a lot of praise and a lot of attention from other podcasters and from my listeners and just people in general. You can actually pick up official Who on Who logo merchandise at our Who on Who store on the website. I got a T-shirt and there's several other items there. It's a great piece of artwork, and I enjoy it. I enjoy Dave's style very much. So to that end, I'm raising the white flag and hollering for help from the greatest listening audience in Doctor Who fandom here. If anyone out there is musically inclined, I have dabbled a little bit listening to songs on Who Mix. I have listened to the various Doctor Who themes, but would love to get something original, something that is uniquely Who on Who. And I don't know exactly what that sounds like yet, but would love to talk to someone about that. If you are so inclined, if you have any interest whatsoever, please shoot me an email, david@whoonwho.com. I will take submissions from anyone that's willing to take some time and a little sweat equity and put something together. I'd be more than happy to listen to it and see if it sort of fits what I'm looking for. I really love the feel of the Doctor Who theme song, but would like to put a different tune to that. So, similar sound, a little different melody, but something still bright and kind of footloose and animated, and something that sort of fits the personality of what I'm trying to do here on the podcast. So, again, if you are so inclined, shoot me an email. You can reach me, david@whoonwho.com, and I would love to hear any suggestions or talk to anyone about that. And we'll be right back with our DVD review right after this.
Oh, okay. Seems to be recording. We're being chased by analog women and you only listen to your record. No, Jimmy, I'm sending a recording. Oh, never mind. I'm the Professor and this is my companion, for lack of a better word. Hey! I'm here to tell you that somehow a recording of my adventures has ended up as a podcast on iTunes. You'll be no getting me in any pod. Jimmy, please, now. Someone has sent me a message that it sounds a little like a parody of a time-travelling doctor. Doctor Who? I don't know which doctor. Now, the recording is called Professor How, and like I said, it's on iTunes or on TalkShoe ID 59601. Professor, the analog women are coming. Gooey, dearie. Oh no, Jimmy, give me the video spanner so I can enter recording.
And at this time, what we are going to do is go ahead and set the TARDIS control to September 29th, 1979, for the first part of the classic Tom Baker story, City of Death. And this one is going to go sans theme song. So let's get the TARDIS control set here. I don't know. That just seemed a little short to me. I'm not sure that I dig that transition, as much as I do going into the theme or whatever. I think I want to incorporate the Doctor Who theme there, as was suggested by one of the listeners, using whichever one is appropriate for the current Doctor. But I didn't want to throw two themes into this podcast that were that similar, so we're going to go without it today. But that's kind of where I am right now, and why maybe some of you can tell that I need something to open the show up, to kind of tell people what the podcast is, what it's all about, and that sort of thing. So enough about that. Let's get into the DVD review. Well, before I go any further with the review of the City of Death DVD, let me just pull the curtain back a little bit for those of you who have been patiently waiting for this episode of Who on Who. This is actually a second attempt to record this particular review and get this podcast out to you. As many of you are aware from reading my website, which is whoonwho.com, of course, that I have been battling a slight illness. Nothing major. It's what we affectionately refer to here in Tennessee in the United States, especially in my region of Tennessee and the eastern side. We call it the East Tennessee crud. It's basically just a seasonal head cold that affects sinuses and all that. For me in particular, it always seems to target my throat, making it very difficult to talk, very persistent cough. Been going off and on now for a couple of weeks, but at least I have the majority of my voice back now, and I'm able to edit the coughs out in post-production. So we will push on to get this episode out, and I appreciate all of you being patient. The other little stumbling block that I ran into is that I had some computer issues and had to do some reformatting and get some things back up to speed. So, of course, that slowed things down as well. But anyway, enough about that. Let's dig right into probably one of the best loved and most entertaining Tom Baker stories. It's a 4-part story featuring of course, Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor and Lalla Ward as Romana, the second version of Romana that we've run into in Doctor Who. This is the Doctor's 105th adventure. This story is directed by Michael Hayes, and the writing credit is actually attributed to a David Agnew, but whether or not that's a pseudonym, the majority of Doctor Who fans of the classic series are aware that the actual writer of this story is the legendary Douglas Adams of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fame. This was actually written, I believe, prior to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you can see a lot of the Douglas Adams style, the humor, and It's a very ambitious story for Doctor Who, really for any science fiction, and that's part of really what makes this so brilliant. The story opens with a individual named Scaroth, who is attempting to take off from prehistoric Earth. In the beginning, we're not told that. He just appears to be on an alien landscape. He's trying to take off in his ship, and he's having some technical difficulties. Attempt to take off at warp speed to break the gravity and to overcome some of the difficulties. This attempted takeoff results in his ship being destroyed and he being splintered into several versions of himself across different time zones. So we next catch up to Scaroth in what is then modern-day Paris in 1979 with the Fourth Doctor and Romana, who are on vacation, and Scaroth is operating under the guise of Count Scarleone, who has been using his advanced technology and his knowledge of history and his other selves throughout time to not only secure very valuable historic artifacts, but to sell them when their value becomes high. Things like the Gutenberg Bible, the Mona Lisa, things like that he is making a fortune off of selling these artifacts and then turning around and using them to fund his experiments to repair himself, to bring all of his selves back together so that he can, be whole again. This tampering with time is really what gets the Doctor involved in the story, and Romana as well, because being Time Lords, they are sensitive to what is going on around them. This story is really, in a nutshell, is not only is it ambitious, they do some wonderful filming around Paris. They also use a lot of great second and third uses of set pieces and that sort of thing to cut down on production costs. But the characters are just brilliant. I mean, fantastically acted and performed. Julian Glover plays Count Scarleone. Of course, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward do an amazing job, and I have always been one to stand up and not be afraid or ashamed as a Doctor Who fan to say that I don't love all of Tom Baker's stuff, especially later on in his run as the Doctor, when he seems to have been starting to grow tired of the role, or perhaps the production has changed, the writing has changed a little bit. But with this being a truly superior script and the humor being there, I mean, Tom Baker is on. There's a scene where the Doctor and Romana are called into Scarleone's mansion to answer for some of their behavior in interrupting the casing of a museum to steal the Mona Lisa. And the Doctor is flippant. He's funny. He is silly to a point of trying to be off-putting to Scarleone, who observes that the Doctor can no way be as stupid as he's trying to make himself seem. And in that particular instance, just reminded me so much of the Second Doctor, who always uses that strategy to throw people off, and in many ways the 10th Doctor, who likes to do the fast talking and just try to put off that high energy to sort of throw people off a little bit as to truly how intelligent and how on top of things that he is. But overall, the story is great. It is, again, like I said, very ambitious story. And the special effects really, I think, while they're dated because it's 1979, are still good, and the production values on the DVD itself, which I will discuss in the DVD extra shortly, are also very good. I mean, the video transfer is amazing when you consider the age and the fact that they're dealing a lot with location shooting and studio shooting, and a lot of times you can clearly tell the difference right away between the bright and crisp studio as opposed to the somewhat grainy texture that you get with location shooting, and I think the restoration team did an admirable job in getting all this cleared out. But the doctor, of course, prevails, and as is always my want, for the sake of time and for the sake of not ruining a wonderful story, I will tell you that that this is a very, very enjoyable episode or adventure to get, but I don't really want to go in and go through and detail out the entire story for you. And I had somebody send me an email recently saying that they weren't going to listen to the podcast anymore because they felt like I was being silly referring to these as spoilers, since all of us have seen these episodes before. That clearly you have the opportunity to see them or to read about them or to listen to the audio or whatever the case may be. And okay, maybe me calling them spoilers is inaccurate at best. You say potato, I say potato. That's fine. But let me just go on to say that the purpose of this podcast is to review the DVD for you, and that includes the quality of the story, my rating of it, the acting, the special features on the DVD, and allow you then to make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to spend your money to purchase said DVD. It's not really so much about discussing stories and giving away spoilers. And, I'm sorry, this is not an audiobook. I'm not going to read out everything so that you don't have to watch the episode. I hope that people understand that that's not my intent. I feel like that is going to stretch the length of the podcast out a bit too long to begin with, and also just sort of takes away from really what I wanted to do. So, hey, if you don't agree with that, if you would prefer that that I go into more detail discussing, every scene and breaking it down and that sort of thing, then, please let me know. It's not that I'm not willing to do that. I just don't know that that's something that you, the listeners, really want from this particular podcast. So in summary, let me say that this particular adventure of the Fourth Doctor merits 5 cloister bells out of 5. I don't usually give 5 out of 5. It's very rare. I think I've only done that once before. But the production is great. The writing is amazing with Douglas Adams, of course, as the author. The actors have fantastic chemistry, not just Tom Baker and Lalla Ward, who do have amazing chemistry, but also the character of Duggan, who adds a wonderful comic element to the Doctor and Romana, and serves that sometimes what I feel is that much-needed third companion role, or additional companion role, if you will, so that it alleviates some of the back and forth between the Doctor and the single companion, that dynamic. So I think Duggan works great, and honestly, I thought that it was sort of a shame that he didn't continue traveling with the Doctor and Romana for a while, because that would have been kind of interesting to see how he developed further as a character. But anyway, I definitely want to give this one 5 cloister bells out of 5. And with that being said, I think it's time that we move right on into one of this particular DVD package's high points, which are, of course, the DVD extras.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Okay, if you're one of those people that goes in for quantity instead of quality, and I'm not saying that the DVD extras aren't quality, but just in sheer quantity, I mean, they had to put this set on 2 discs to cover the DVD extras, and they are a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and run them down real quick, as we do on every episode here at Who on Who. I'm going to start off with the 2 bonus features that are actually on the first disc that accompanies the story, City of Death, and that is, of course, the infotext and the audio commentary track. The commentary track is recorded by the director, Michael Hayes, by Julian Glover, who plays Scaroth / Count Scarleone, and Tom Chadman, the actor who played Duggan. And I have to say that the commentary, initially, of course, I was disappointed because Tom Baker's, or neither Tom Baker or Lalla Ward are there to reminisce about their story. But from things that I have experienced so far with other DVDs of Tom Baker's and things that I've read and talked to with other Doctor Who fans, he has a difficult time remembering specifics about stories. And so it's almost better, once I got past that initial disappointment, it was better to have these people who have only done, very limited or maybe in this case one Doctor Who story, because they remember so much while recording, and they all got along very well, and as many of you know from listening to the show, that sort of interaction and the joviality and all that is really what I consider to be the best factor in a great audio commentary. And the infotext here is unmatched. It's fantastic. There's plenty of it, and it's a great complement to the commentary. So do like I usually do. Put the commentary track on, put the infotext on, and just sort of read and listen as you're going along, and you will find out a lot of really wonderful nuggets about the story, about what was going on at the time, the filming, and all that sort of thing. Now, on to the bonus disc here, which is essentially all bonus material. There is a fantastic documentary entitled Paris in the Springtime. It runs approximately about 45 minutes, and it basically tells the whole background story of City of Death. The original script and story, which had a different title, to the bringing in of Douglas Adams, the last-minute rewrite, the marathon writing session that Douglas Adams had to go through. They talk about the location filming in Paris. They also interview a lot of the story's staff, the production staff. There's also some archive footage of 2 interviews with Douglas Adams, which is really nice. He discusses his time on Doctor Who in general. He talks about his work on City of Death in particular and the whole experience of writing. They interview Catherine Schell, who plays the Countess Scarleone, and fans of another science fiction series would recognize her as, I believe she was in Space 1999. If not, somebody, of course, write me in and set me straight on that, but I'm pretty sure she was. And there was also, they talked to the original writer, David Fisher, and he, again, City of Death went through countless reiterations before it made it to screen, and the original story was actually called A Gamble with Time that David Fisher wrote, and Douglas Adams, of course, did the major rewrite, and that's when the title changed along with many other facets, so it would fit into production. One of the cool things for current Doctor Who fans is that there is they interview Stephen Moffat and Rob Shearman, who were both writing for the current series, and of course Stephen Moffat is now the new showrunner for the 2010 series starring Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, and they discuss a little bit about Douglas Adams, about Doctor Who, this particular story's impact on them, and it's just nice. It's nice to kind of tie that in. I thought the timing was interesting because at this point Stephen Moffat plays such a huge role in the world of Doctor Who, even though he had a significant role when that was recorded. It's so much more now, so it was kind of nice to see him interviewed on there as well. Next bonus is something called Paris W12. It's a 20-minute compilation of material. It's shooting material, basically, from the studio. And it's basically raw studio footage. A lot of people like this. It gives you a very interesting insight into the filming process, the background. Sometimes you get little indications of personality quirks and that sort of thing. I'm not a big fan of it, only because, to me, it almost sort of wrecks the illusion of the story and the characters as their characters, because you're seeing the actors at that point, and it's just not removed enough. You're seeing the actors performing their actual craft, and for me personally, I would much rather see the story unblemished, if you will. The next little bit, the next little bonus is called Prehistoric Landscapes. I did find this very interesting because it is a look in the scale model work of the spaceship that was used, the primeval Earth landscape, the explosion sequence. They also have a very interesting bonus called Chicken Wrangler, where they talk to the special effects man that had to struggle with various chickens of different sizes and all for a sequence in City of Death, where the professor who's working for Count Scarleone actually takes a chicken from an egg to a full chicken, and it's very interesting to watch them trying to get all that set up to film it. And there's of course your obligatory photo gallery, and another bonus called Ion Blatchford, which some of you may enjoy, some of you may not. I guess it really sort of depends on how serious you like to take your DVD extras, and related, of course, to Doctor Who. In an earlier episode of Who on Who, I reviewed Pyramids of Mars, and I believe I did that with James Naughton from Doctor Who Podshop. Or it may have been the one that I reviewed with Louis Trapani. Memory is fading there. I know that Ken Deep and I did Inferno, and I do remember that one, but it may have been... No, I take that back. It was James. Louis and I did Vengeance on Barros. So anyway, when we reviewed Pyramids of Mars, there was a DVD extra on Pyramids of Mars called Oh Mummy, and it was a spoof about Sutekh, the villain. Ion Blatchford is basically done by the same team that did that. It recounts the day-to-day life of Sardoth, who's another Jaggeroth creature. And very similar vein. Some of the jokes are good. There are bits of it that I thought were very ambitious, and there were other bits that I thought fell kind of flat within it. I would love to see them do more, but I think that they need need to step up their game a little bit. But other than that, if you like good comedy or even bad comedy, it is definitely something to watch. At least watch it once. You may never go back and rewatch it, but why not give it a tumble? Anyway, there are, for those of you who are fans of Easter eggs, 4 Easter eggs that I was able to find on this DVD. The first one is a BBC continuity announcement for the next story, which is called The Creature from the Pit. The next one is really, really well done. It is a spoof, sort of, but it's a video instruction manual from the Jaggeroth battlecruiser, the company that supposedly builds the ships, and it's actually done by the same production team that did the Ion Blatchford and Oh Mummy bit, but they use some CGI from the Jaggeroth ship model and talk a little bit about. Basically, it's like an animated sales brochure if you were in the market to buy your own Jaggeroth battlecruiser, but very enjoyable. I like that one quite a bit. The next Easter egg is a 6-minute interview with Douglas Adams, who he shares a very interesting story about a drunken trip to Paris that he made with Ken Grieve, who's a Doctor Who director, and then there is a Easter egg called Good Wolf, Bad Wolf. It's a 2-minute outtake from the Ion Blatchford featuring Gabriel Wolf. And finally, the classic gag, which is, I think, infamous among Doctor Who fans and especially fans of City of Death, is a gag between John Cleese from Monty Python and Tom Baker, as John Cleese is trying to get Tom Baker to give him an autograph, and he claims it's for his godson and all this. It's a funny little bit. If you're a Cleese fan, you're definitely going to enjoy it. So that about does it for the DVD extras, and that about does it for this episode of Who on Who. Now, before I go any further, I would like to apologize. I feel like no amount of editing is going to hide the fact that this episode of Who on Who is a little more disjointed, actually a lot more disjointed than most of the episodes that I've done. Again, I just would like to say that there's been some things going on in the background, illness, computer issues, things like that have made getting all this together and getting it out to you in any semblance of a timely manner a Herculean task at best. And so I apologize if the quality is not up to snuff, and I promise to do that next time, to be back on my game and ready to roll. Next time we begin the Trial of a Time Lord review. The first story, of course, being The Mysterious Planet, and my guest co-host will be my friend from Facebook, Peter Cavanna, and I'm very excited to have Peter joining me on the show, and I have volunteers lined up for all of the episodes of Trial of a Time Lord, but if you were interested in doing it and didn't get a chance to get lined up because we were limited with how many stories we could do, fear not and hang tight, because if this goes as well as I think it will, I'm going to follow this up by doing guest co-host reviews with the Key to Time series with Tom Baker, and we'll line up people from both sides of the pond to help me with that one. So stay tuned, and I will be back with you with more information on that. Now, speaking of Facebook, I also want to give a special shout-out to my friend Craig LeBlanc, who asked me to shout out to him on Facebook, and also wanted to welcome some of my new friends on there, Brian Burkhart, Alan Butcher, Stephen Shapansky, and Benjamin Elliott. Thank you all for friend requesting me and for listening to the podcast. I appreciate that. You can, of course, also follow me on Twitter at www.twitter.com/DavidHuey. And you can also help support the podcast by buying your Who on Who swag, T-shirts, hoodies, as it's starting to get a little colder outside, some buttons, mouse pads, and different things at the official Who on Who store. There's a link at the website, www.whoonwho.com. We have a great forum community there, a lot of people who love to talk Doctor Who, classic and new Doctor Who, even though the podcast stays pretty firm to the classic series. We do like to discuss the new show as well. So if you're not a member of that community, come on over and join in our reindeer games. We would love to have you. That about wraps it up for this episode. Again, thank you to all of you for hanging in there with me. Thank you for following through on this podcast, even though it was not quite what I had initially intended it to be. And hopefully Michael from the Tin Dog Podcast and I will be able to hook up in the very near future to do Genesis of the Daleks. But until next time, for Mysterious Planet, I am David Huey, and I look forward to hearing from you. You can email me also at david@whoonwho.com. Everybody, have a great Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.